Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. As always, I'm Amber Duke, joined at the desk by Niall Stanage.
Pleasure to see you, Amber. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
You have good holiday times?
I did you?
I did. I was back in Ireland, but briefly in England, and it was all good. So
That's
yes,
wonderful. I'm glad to hear it.
All good, relaxing.
We have a big news day today, obviously, with the speaker battle. The embattled Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, will find out if he gets to keep his job when Congress votes later today. He needs 218 votes to win, and he has President-elect Donald Trump's endorsement. Republicans are down to only 219 House seats, a one-seat majority, and there are now at least 2 GOP members who are adamant that Johnson will not get their vote. Kentucky Representative Thomas Massie said that he would not be voting for Johnson under any circumstances. Here's what he had to say.
You can pull all my fingernails out. You can shove bamboo up in them. You can start cutting off my fingers. I am not voting for Mike Johnson tomorrow.
The Wall Street Journal has pointed to 3 other potential Republican rebels: Freedom Caucus Chairman Andy Harris of Maryland, Chip Roy of Texas, and Victoria Spartz of Indiana. Democrats currently have 215 members in the House. They're all expected to vote, and they will vote for their leader, Hakeem Jeffries, as Speaker. If the House doesn't elect a Speaker today, the future looks uncertain. As the Wall Street Journal notes, if no Speaker has been elected by January the 6th, Congress likely won't be able to ratify Trump's election or the election of Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Quote, if there is still no Speaker, no functioning House, and no certification by Inauguration Day on January the 20th, then the new GOP-controlled Senate's President pro tempore, 91-year-old Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, would become president, according to the presidential line of succession. Last night, the outspoken and hardline Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene called on her colleagues to put an end to the drama and unite behind Johnson. Here she is.
Here's what I'm asking my colleagues to do. Let's put aside our pride, let's put aside our egos, and let's put aside the infighting. It's time to come together as Republicans, and it's time to do whatever it takes to make sure that we deliver the mandate that the American people told us to do.
So obviously quite an intriguing day looming. Perhaps by the time some of our audience sees this, there will be less suspense than there is right now. But Mike Johnson has very little room for error. He can only afford to lose 2 Republicans, it is assumed, assuming Democrats vote as expected. It is interesting to me that the harder line people are not for the most part really coming out in opposition to him. They're saying they have not been convinced, and that's where we have about a dozen Republicans. How deep do you think the dissatisfaction among those more, hardline or fiscally conservative members is to Johnson?
I think it's less deep than it was against Kevin McCarthy. Speaker Johnson has refused to sort of make these side deals that angered a lot of the hardline conservatives because they felt that he had gone back on these promises. Mike Johnson has sort of given broader promises related to particularly spending bills, which is where a lot of the consternation comes from, was the CR deal that he made with Democrats back before the holidays, trying to prevent a government shutdown. But he also has a strong endorsement from Donald Trump as well, which is important as we head into the certification of the election on January 6th. Republicans are not going to want to go into January 6th without a speaker, without the ability to certify that vote and risk angering the president-elect and also his, tampering his ability to potentially get his agenda enacted. I think one of the biggest problems facing the opponents to Speaker Johnson is that they don't have a viable opposition candidate.
100%.
At least with Kevin McCarthy, there were other names being floated around. This time, I haven't even seen whispers of another name. Nobody wants the job, besides apparently Speaker Johnson, because it is such a slim majority. So those factors, I think, really complicate the ability of Thomas Massie and some of his allies to go against Johnson. And Bob Good, I mentioned he's not a member of the 119th Congress, so I don't believe he'll have the ability to vote on this. Is that right?
That's what I think. We'll need maybe someone in the control room can verify that for us. I didn't think that he could. I agree with you, but I stand corrected if that's wrong. To the point about the alternative names, the thing that struck me is the only names I've heard mentioned are Jim Jordan or Steve Scalise, Tom Emmer, people who tried previously, the last go-round, generally speaking, to get support for them, and it wasn't forthcoming. And it's also not plain to me what they would do very different from Mike Johnson. I think in the case of Kevin McCarthy, if one was a conservative Republican, which isn't a sentence I normally say, I see why they would be sceptical of McCarthy. He's a kind of glad-handery, kind of do deals on the side kind of guy. Mike Johnson has flaws like all politicians, and all people have flaws, but I don't think he's really cut from similar cloth.
No, I don't get that sense. McCarthy was sort of known as being this sort of sneaky political operator who would kind of do whatever it took to get to the top and wanted to be Speaker for a really long time. Mike Johnson was sort of thrust into the role, so that makes him a little bit less of an opportunist like McCarthy was. If you listen to our reporting from our friend Emily Brooks at The Hill, she talked about the fact as well that Speaker Johnson is making this pitch to his friends on the further right wing of the party that now that they have, even if it is just a single vote majority, they have the ability to negotiate within the Republican Party as to what bills are going to be advanced, whereas heading into the holidays, they needed Democratic votes in order to get a CR passed because the right wing was so opposed to a spending deal, and they needed, of course, the Senate to pass it as well, which was controlled by Democrats. So he seems to think that he's going to be able to govern a little bit differently with a Republican majority in both chambers.
Yeah.
Now, the question, of course, is whether people believe that. Thomas Massie obviously doesn't, but is his word trusted enough among other people on that flank to give him another shot?
Right, and I think it is interesting just looking at this from the sort of 30,000-foot view, that it seems to me Republicans are aware of how they have damaged themselves in previous Speaker battles or in previous instances where there have been chaos in the House. And one example of them trying to correct that is obviously during McCarthy's time there was this idea that just one member could bring forth a motion to vacate, which is a fancy way of saying a motion to try to get rid of the Speaker. Now I see in the new rules package that's been put forth you would need 9 members in order to do that. So that's obviously an attempt to safeguard against the kind of plunge over the abyss into chaos that we've seen in
Sure. I mean, obviously these Republicans don't want to go into the second term of a Trump presidency with all of these agenda items that they're interested in pushing through with chaos and disorder. They want party unity as much as they can possibly get it. With Republicans, I'm not sure you're ever going to get full party unity the way that the Democrats sometimes are able to have an effect. But they definitely don't want to be going on these side quests and distractions of replacing leadership or otherwise having constant public squabbling when they have a very clear agenda that they've been sort of mandated to enact.
So let me put you on the spot then, Amber. You think Johnson's going to get it on the first ballot, or you think it'll take a few go-rounds?
I think it might take 2 or 3, but I would expect, just on a gut feeling, that he will end up becoming Speaker again.
Amber Duke with the speculation, the educated guess. We'll see if Amber's right, but join us for more Rising after this.